This issue is about the Constitution. And we've already fought these issues. America's already moved forward. What is our concern here is that the preponderance of the policies you are promoting is eerily reminiscent of Old South policies. You've launched an all-out war on voting. Your voter suppression tactics make it harder to vote, while at the same time you are making it easier to get guns. And is this how the leadership of this General Assembly wants to be known? As being on the wrong side of history, the wrong side of democracy, the wrong side of the Constitution? Do you not know or understand that when this Republican-led General Assembly seeks to push poll taxes, disguised as voter ID, and curtail same-day voter registration, and eliminate Sunday voting,
Mr. Chairman,
we do not need an attempt to grab power, an attempt to steal and suppress the vote, cutting insurance for the poorest among us. Instead, what we should be doing, and what we believe from our expert opinion, enforce universal compliance with the 14th, 15th, and 24th Amendment of the Constitution and the voting right. Maintain the best laws in the nation, signature attestation combined with a 5-year felony and a charge for lying. Stop race-based gerrymandering and redistricting which disenfranchises black and minority voters. Enforce the North Carolina Constitution requirement that all elections be free. Improve early voting by opening polls on more Saturdays than Sundays. Open countywide voting centers on election day with same-day registration. Felony enfranchisement after people have paid their debt to society, and release the Help American Vote Act monies to allow for smoother election. Make automatic registration on 18th birthday like the draft, and make the election day a state holiday. North Carolina has the best election laws in the country. We've had elections in 237 years in North Carolina without a so-called voter ID, 237 years. And only after the massive turnout of African Americans, Latinos, progressive whites, students, and the elderly fundamentally changing the electorate in the South did the false witness and distortion about fraud begin and the cry for voter poll tax disguised as voter ID. Your own leader has said it's not even about voter fraud on national TV, the Speaker of the House. Voting is a constitutional right, protected by more constitutional amendments than any other rights we have as Americans. Constitutional rights are given to keep the majority from exercising tyranny over the minority. Let the people vote. You won with the people voting. Let the people vote.
House Committee on Elections will come to order. We have one bill on today's committee. Of course, that is the VIVA, Voter Identification Verification Act. That is sponsored by Representatives Warren, Murray, myself, and Samuelson. Do we have any other questions of the bill sponsors? Representative Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Murray, if you get a chance to vote but your vote isn't counted, how does that comply with the constitutional requirement that you can't have any additional qualifications to vote?
When the Indiana voter ID law was challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I quote from the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court with regards to the Indiana voter ID law, the voter ID requirement does not add a qualification to vote. It is merely regulatory in nature. And so that's what this law does, and we think it complies with the U.S. Constitution and the North Carolina Constitution based on U.S. Supreme Court decisions.
But Representative Murray, the North Carolina Constitution has its own qualifications, and our North Carolina Constitution has been interpreted to say that you cannot add qualifications to vote. And so the United States Supreme Court does not have the authority to interpret what the North Carolina Constitution has to say about its citizens. It can only interpret the North Carolina Constitution as it may conflict with the U.S. Constitution. But federalism, which this body loves, says that only the North Carolina Supreme Court can interpret the North Carolina Constitution as it applies in North Carolina. Therefore, is letting somebody vote but not counting their ballot sufficient to say that you're staying within the Constitution for who has a right to vote?
And when the Georgia Supreme Court interpreted the challenge by the Democrat Party of Georgia to the Georgia photo ID law, the Georgia Supreme Court interpreted the Georgia provision of the Georgia Constitution, which is very similar to North Carolina's, to allow the legislature to prescribe reasonable regulations as to how these qualifications shall be determined. And so that our North Carolina Supreme Court has interpreted our Constitution in the very same way. The legislature can, on a reasonable basis, have qualifications, have regulations for voting that help improve the voting process. We have the ability to do this at the legislature, and it's been upheld by two state Supreme Court decisions, one in Georgia, one in North Carolina, and the U.S. Supreme Court has done the same, so it doesn't violate either the North Carolina or the U.S. Constitution.
Mr. Chairman, just a final comment on that.
You may state your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Georgia is not North Carolina, and last year 7 of this body's acts were declared unconstitutional.
Representative Michaud, you have a question for the bill sponsors?
Well, I have another question, but I'd like to follow up after that question on what just transpired, if you don't mind. I was a part of a group in the 1960s that were reviled for trying to get voting rights for a group of people that had been denied those voting rights over the years. And since we have had the Voting Rights Act, and all of the others that gave us the opportunity to cast that ballot, we have had no problems. You raise a specter of fraud where there has been shown, even your speaker said that fraud is not the question, but the integrity of the vote is the question. Nobody has questioned the integrity of that vote, even since we had to fight to get that vote. So I'm here to tell you that I will fight to the death, because a lot of folks that I know died for that right to vote without being hampered, without it being fettered at all. But this is the first step in suppressing a vote for people who have fought and died to have that vote given to them. We know that you have the power to do it, and you're going to do it whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
What they're doing is not going to create voter integrity. It's going to be voter suppression. So there's no voter integrity in that whatsoever. So that's one thing I want to figure out. How can you say that you're going to create that, but you're creating voter suppression? So.
And I was in there for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, and every proposal that they put out was shut down, even the most modest of changing the language from may to shall, about giving folks information about what identification is needed. I was very shocked by how everything was immediately voted down.
Like Laura was saying, everything that was basically proposed, first of all, we're against it anyway. So there's not really anything that could have amended the bill unless they were saying we're amending it to say it's not going to happen. If they would have amended to say we're not going to have the bill, then we would have been in support of that. But just to even allow reasonable amendments, I thought was very offensive.
But it seemed to me that it was definitely already decided what amendments they would accept, which ones they wouldn't, and that's the way they went. So it's we're up against a strong coalition, but the people's power is greater than their power.
I think we need to put this thing in perspective. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, and today is the 53rd anniversary of the foundation of SNCC, right here at Shaw University, you know, right here in Raleigh. So it's a great testament to that legacy that we're here, but it is also very sad that we have to be here still fighting the same battles that they fought for. Dr. King fought to expand voting rights for everyone. SNCC fought to expand voting rights for everyone. So the fact that us as youth, our generation, is here fighting the same battles, it's a little scary, and it says what this legislature is capable of. But like Bob said, the people's power is stronger than their power, so we're going to continue to push.
I simply have the picture of those times in my mind, and therefore there is just nothing, even in spite of all the work and all of the due diligence that can happen, that will make me support something that lends itself to making it so difficult for an American citizen to go and cast a vote simply because they are that, a citizen of the state of North Carolina. Thank you very much.
This bill does not make it difficult to vote. And this is just a common sense step that's easy, very easy, no matter what you say in the terms of rhetoric. It is very easy under this bill to exercise your right to vote. Not one person is being deprived of their right to vote. Not one. So it does not suppress votes. And I'm not going to wear your tags, and I'm not going to cower in my seat and sink a little bit lower as the rhetoric gets thrown around in here and the accusations get thrown. I am proud to support this bill. It is a very common sense approach to what can be, and I believe is, a huge problem.
What problems have we had? What problems have we had with voting in this country? A country that is based on liberty and freedom. What problems have we had? None. We haven't had any problems in North Carolina. And yet, what you're doing is you're putting roadblocks in the way of people who want to exercise that right that is guaranteed by both the North Carolina Constitution and the United States Constitution. Not the privilege. It is not a privilege. It is a right to vote. And under our U.S. Constitution, you cannot abridge that right to vote. And so, yes, I'm going to always fight anything that, in my estimation or anybody else's estimation, says that we are going to put a stop to your coming to the polls and the numbers that you come to the polls in. We're going to put a stop to allowing you to vote without showing who you are or what you are.
I am so tired of hearing this, and I feel it's necessary to say this. The Republican Party has been the party of freedom, and we have sat here in these hearings, in these meetings, and listened to this over and over and over again, this rhetoric. We are not trying to suppress anybody. We are not trying to oppress anybody. It's got nothing to do with the elderly. It's got nothing to do with race. Let's be adult about this, people, and let's discuss this in an adult manner and stop trying to debase the issue.
Further discussion, further debate. Representative Harrison is recognized to debate the bill.
I think we're imposing a cost on our taxpayers that is not necessary, creating this new bureaucracy and the cost of implementing this program, which was not insignificant. I also have been very concerned in listening to the testimony of those who came up and spoke at the public hearings about the impact on those who are low income, homeless, severely poor. I think those will be the most negatively impacted. And I think it's unfortunate that we are imposing these burdens on voters, and I'm going to be voting against the bill, and I urge you to as well. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Tyler Swanson. I'm a student from North Carolina A&T. And we just left the meeting with the General Assembly about the voter ID law, which we are totally against because we feel it's a form of a poll tax. It also disenfranchises hundreds of North Carolinians who do not lack the proper ID for them to vote.
There are certain times that require us as American citizens and youth people to speak up and respond to immoral and unjust circumstances that threaten to undermine the educational, civic, and economic equality of the youth and college students of the state of North Carolina. We now find ourselves compelled to advocate for the respect of the basic freedoms afforded all students regardless of race, color, race, and creed. Current legislative actions go directly against the respect for all values for every U.S. citizen, and they threaten the very meaning of democracy in the state. Therefore, we, the Youth and College Division of the North Carolina State Conference of the NAACP branches, do publicly and collectively express our disagreement with such laws, which have left us no choice but to issue this call of action.
The NC General Assembly has disregarded any consideration for the rights of students across the state by proposing a bill that will make it harder for them to vote. This bill would require a poll tax either directly or indirectly through a voter photo ID law. Voter ID would create new and unnecessary hurdles for students to vote. It would also reduce early voting. It will end Sunday voting. It will end same-day registration, which many of the first-time college students use. Would take away dependent tax deduction for parents whose children are registered to vote at their college, which is called Senate Bill 666. These bills would make it harder for people who would serve their debt to society and finish their parole by making them wait 5 years to vote and jump through other hurdles. This bill would also amend the state constitution to add mental incompetent to the list of those automatically denied the right to vote. Currently, judges have to specify that this subjective discrimination inhibits individuals' ability to vote.
Public education is under attack. Proposed bills would undermine primary, secondary, and higher education as we know it, cause major segregation in the public schools with the expansion of charter schools and vouchers, eliminate teacher tenure and create grading systems that would fail to recognize schools that are improving, end limits on classroom size, and would prohibit undocumented immigrants from having access to the community colleges or public universities in the state, despite having been brought to the U.S. when they were children.
It hurts my heart to know that the legislators are even considering hindering college students that attend public and private schools to have a certain type of ID. It really hurts my heart because most of my colleagues are from other states. When you are from another state other than North Carolina and you vote and you try to vote in North Carolina, it hinders you because you're not a resident of North Carolina. Now we're going to fight back until we get what we want. Justice will be served and we will have equality.
Senate Bill 89 would repeal the state's long-standing bill on payday loans and would destroy many students' credit by targeting students that are already in a financial bind and are looking for quick cash. These are just a small sample of the regressive bills now before the legislature. We are not done here. We will be back to challenge any violation of human and civil rights of students and of all people, particularly that of the oppressed. We therefore call on student organizations whose primary mission is to support, protect, and fight for the freedoms of every student and young person, regardless of status, color, or creed, across the state to stand with the Youth and College Division of the North Carolina NAACP and demand at once an end to these racially discriminatory and undemocratic laws. We know that an attack on the voting rights and civic engagement of young people cuts at the heart of the potential for progress in our state and in our nation. We will fight back. Together forward.
Not one step back.
Very nice. I too sing America. I'm the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I go, I eat, and I go strong. And the next time company comes, I will be at that table. And you will see how beautiful my argument is. I too sing America.